Hi there, my name's Rob. I'm one of the ministers here at Andover Baptist Church, and today I'd like to continue to talk to you about how my Christian faith has been strengthened through the practice of the Korean martial art of Taekwondo. This week we're specifically looking at some of the rich meaning behind the coveted black belt, and how the philosophy behind this incredible martial art can remind us of some of the rich theology of the Christian faith. I've already spoken about how the black belt represents both an infinite universe of knowledge available to the student and also can be a sign of maturity of the student. But there's something that can stand in the way of our learning and of our maturity in the martial arts journey and in the Christian faith, and that obstacle is fear. For centuries, darkness has been used as a metaphor for fear itself and for the things that we fear, perhaps because in the darkness we can't see, and what we can't see could be a danger that's lurking somewhere. You know, nighttime is when people tell horror stories to each other because everything seems scarier in the dark. And like many people, I was afraid of the dark as a child because I was convinced that there were monsters lurking in the shadows. Later, my fear of the dark became about burglars hiding where I couldn't see them. I got over these childhood fears by having a nightlife for many years that shone into that darkness and revealed that my greatest fears were actually unfounded. And once I realized that darkness is merely the absence of light, I was able to overcome my fear of it by knowing how to defeat it. A torch. And that's what a black belt represents, the courage and the determination to keep facing one's darkest fears with an undefeatable attitude. A black belt has the tools to face fear with courage. A black belt is simply a white belt who never gave up in the face of adversity. A black belt understands that whilst there is darkness in the world, we must not shy away from confronting it. We must fight against evil and injustice, oppression, abuse, greed, corruption, bullying, and every manifestation of the darkness in this world. And that takes courage and the belief that whilst we may naturally fear the darkness fears the light even more. You know, a black belt is meant to be a light in their community, a confronter of wrong and an ambassador of what is right and good. And here's where Taekwondo once again intersects with my faith, reminding me of how Christians are called to be light in the darkness, revealing truth and confronting evil in a world. And we are called to do this with unshakable courage, because we believe that the light cannot be overpowered by darkness, but that darkness will always be overcome by the power of the light. You know, for Christians, Jesus is that light, the victor over all the forces of evil in the world. And in modern culture, we see the annual celebration of Halloween has become about witches and ghosts and goblins and monsters, but years ago it was actually used by the church to celebrate Christ's victory over the powers of evil that nailed him to the cross and buried him in the grave. His resurrection was meant to be celebrated as a great victory over the things that scare us the most. It was meant to remind Christians that we need to oppose evil with courage because the light of the goodness of Christ is the antidote to the darkness that troubles us. It was supposed to point to the fact that evil should fear us, because Christ has not just given us an example, but also power and a mandate to fight against and to overcome the evil that we see in the world. The Apostle Paul, one of Jesus' early disciples, puts it this way in the book of Ephesians in the New Testament part of the Bible. He says in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 11 to 13, "Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything, stand." You know, standing against evil can feel very intimidating, and we must remember, however, that we are not standing alone. Jesus came to reveal that God is with us always, through thick and thin. And so we need to be bold and face our fears, because in a war between light and darkness, light wins every time. One of Jesus' closest disciples by the name of John put it this way when talking about Jesus. In John chapter 1, verses 3 to 5, he said, "Through him," that's Jesus, "through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Folks, when we walk with Jesus, following his lead and doing his will, we have the power to stand against darkness in this world and to not be overcome by it. What evil have you been too afraid to oppose? What dark forces have frightened you into submission, even though you carry the light of Christ with you wherever you go? What fear do you need to overcome right now for the benefit of others? Who do you need to stand up for or stand with? What evil do you see in the world that you are called to shine a light on? Do you fear the darkness, or do you believe that the darkness should fear you because the Holy Spirit of God who lives in you is greater than all of the evil forces at work in our world?